How many times have we heard the old saying, no two fires are alike? To a certain extent, this saying is true. There are thousands of variables at work in every fire. To recognize and deal with these variables requires a great deal of experience. But all fires also have a great deal in common. While firefighting theories and concepts cannot give the nozzleman experience, they can arm the firefighter with some valuable knowledge concerning how fires act. Armed with this information, the firefighter can anticipate and plan action. One of the easiest things the firefighter can do about structural fire is develop a pre-fire plan for the structures in his area. There are many elements of pre-fire planning that relate to rescue problems and firefighter safety. Pre-fire planning of this sort is required for unique structures. Do the contents of the building pose any potential hazards to firefighters? Where is the nearest water supply? Where can we place apparatus around the building? Where are all of the exits from the building? Housing developments that contain houses with basically similar layouts do not require this type of approach. Pre-fire planning is usually restricted to commercial buildings which present special hazards. A most basic question is how much water will the firefighter need to control a fire at this establishment? There are several formulas used currently for computing water flow requirements. One simple and conservative formula states that the cubic feet of total fire involvement divided by 100 equals the minimum gallons per minute water flow required to control that fire. For example, if we are making a pre-fire plan for a theater 75 feet by 75 feet by 40 feet, how much water will we have to flow to control a fire that fully involves that area? There are 225,000 cubic feet of space in the theater. Divided by 100, we need 2,250 GPM to control the fire. With that information, we can make decisions about the equipment and manpower we would need if that theater were on fire. While some firefighters favor different formulas, all experts agree on the need for this kind of pre-fire planning.
Today we're going to talk about fire spread and how it relates to fire extension in a building and exposures, both internal and external.
There are some other things we should know about before we attempt to deal with a structural fire. We need to learn, in general terms, how fire spreads. We must find out how fire extends in structures, and we must know the stages of development of a structural fire.
Okay, here we have a small fire. It hasn't produced much heat yet, and I want you to notice that direct flame contact is not necessary for the spread of this fire to occur. Generally speaking, fire spread can occur in three ways: convection, conduction, and radiation. Convection basically is the expansion of hot gases. These gases then become lighter than the surrounding cooler, denser air. They seek to rise vertically and pass through any available opening they can find. Convection can cause fire spread to upper floors from lower floors. In seeking to move vertically, these gases will usually do a certain amount of horizontal traveling. If these superheated gases pass through an open door and along a hall ceiling to reach a stairway, for example, vertical and horizontal spread occurs. Now, I want you to watch here as the convection heat builds up across the ceiling. It's getting a little warmer in here. John, let me have your hand a minute. A little warm, isn't it? If you left your hand there, you'd get a good case of sunburn eventually. That's radiant heat. Best example of radiant heat is the sun. The sun heats the earth via radiant heat. Okay, from a distance we feel heat. Radiant heat is the transmission of heat from a heated object to a cooler one by heat waves. It occurs in all directions. Gases build up along the ceiling in a room, and all of a sudden there was a flash across the top of the ceiling. Those gases build up to a point where the right mixture of oxygen and combustible material occurred, and those gases ignited. If there is fuel on the floor, furniture or boxes for example, and the burning gases on the ceiling are generating radiant heat, what happens? The radiant heat raises the temperature of the fuel to its ignition point, and it burns. Since radiation can cause fire spread in any direction from the heat source, the possibilities are almost unlimited. There's one more way that heat travels, and that's conduction. Conduction is the transmission of heat through a solid material. As an example, in a house fire, if there are pipes, say, that pass from a basement to the first floor of the house, and we have a serious basement fire, the pipe could conceivably become heated to the point where it would actually ignite materials on the first floor, such as the flooring material, a box that might be placed against the pipe, a wall board, clothing in a closet, whatever. Conduction is not one of the major causes of actual fire spread, but in certain types of construction it can cause potentially dangerous structural weakness. Embers can also cause fire spread. Embers can ride convection currents up from a burning building and ride the wind to other structures in the area. Burning embers can drop through holes in the floor or down stairways and cause downward fire extension. This fire can go one of two directions from here. If it had enough fuel and we let it burn, it would become what we call a steady state fire. Steady state fire is one where there is plenty of oxygen to burn the available fuel. It would eventually burn itself out if nothing were done to stop it. If that didn't happen, it would become a smoldering fire. That is, one part of the fire triangle is missing, oxygen. The heat, the fuel is present, but not enough oxygen to support a free-burning fire, or a steady state fire. A smoldering fire is potentially very dangerous. It can develop into what's known as a backdraft condition. That is, a smoldering fire burns up all the available oxygen inside a building. The building is tight enough so that the fire doesn't burn through anywhere. Say it doesn't burn through the roof, for example, to ventilate itself. It sucks air through a crack in a window, a chink in a brick, a small crack in a shingle. Very rare. Backdrafts don't occur very often. Usually the fire burns through somewhere, blows out a window, whatever, and ventilates itself. When a backdraft does occur, it is extremely dangerous. For instance, a fireman walking up to the front door of a building in which a backdraft exists, who kicks the door down, will cause an explosion and probably cause great injury to himself. To handle a backdraft, you should open the building up, cause ventilation to occur at the highest point from which you see smoke, such as the crest of the roof, an upper story window, whatever, to allow the superheated gases to escape before entry is made at a lower level.
Now that we have a good idea of how fire spreads, how do we put that knowledge to work on the fire ground? Let's start by reviewing our order of priorities at a structural fire. Our first priority, rescue, is always job number one. If initial lines can separate the fire from a life, then the first line off the truck should attend to this job. Our second priority is to cover the exposures or to protect property. Our third priority is to extinguish the fire. The second priority, covering the exposures, bears some explanation. An exposure of a fire is any combustible material to which the fire is likely to spread. Exposures can be other structures near the fire. These exposures are generally referred to as exterior exposures. An exposure can also be any area inside the burning structure to which the fire might spread. These are referred to as interior exposures. We have to apply our knowledge of fire spread to the situation to decide where the exposures are. Then we must place our hose lines in places that will cover these exposures. The object here is to contain the fire to the smallest possible area. It stands to reason that if we are waiting with hose lines at the areas the fire will spread to next, then the fire will not get there. Thus, we have contained the fire. Once the exposures are covered, we can move to our next priority, extinguishment. Where an exterior attack through the window may well have pushed this fire further into the building, the interior attack with ventilation pushed the fire, heat, and smoke out the window and away from the interior exposure. In a small fire, where heat has not been generated in great quantities, our exposures are located in a small area very close to the fire. The most effective way to cover the exposures in this case is to simply extinguish the fire. The attack method, in this case, is the direct attack. Direct attack is simply the application of water directly to the burning material. This job is done with a straight stream. The nozzle should be opened up enough in the direct attack to penetrate the burning material. If the nozzle is opened up too far, the consequences are needless water damage and flying embers which can cause further fire spread. The straight stream is used in the direct attack because it penetrates well into the deep-seated fire and it draws less fresh air to the fire than the fog attack. An excellent way to accomplish the direct attack is to move the nozzle in an up and down motion from one side of the fire to the other. This method is less confusing and certainly takes less water than attacking the fire in a helter-skelter pattern. What if we arrive at a fire in the next stage of evolution? A free-burning fire is a bit more complex than the small fire. A substantial amount of heat has been generated, and the fire is spreading in several directions. You can see a condition developing in the room called thermal balance. The hot gases and smoky products of combustion rise and accumulate near the ceiling. The cooler, clear air collects near the floor, permitting better visibility and working conditions. The fire itself creates this thermal balance, and if the firefighter can maintain it during extinguishment, his job will be safer and easier. In fires like these, the overhead attack can work very well. With the overhead attack, a fog stream is applied briefly to the superheated gases which have collected near the ceiling. This halts the rapid spread of the fire, but does not upset the thermal balance. As a result, the firefighter has visibility during the direct attack and overhaul. The fire extension in this room is well within safe limits, and again the overhead attack has been chosen. This time, too much water is applied to the overhead, and you can see the results of upsetting the thermal balance, which permitted visibility. Again, the firefighter arrives to meet a free-burning fire. This time, the overhead attack is applied straight up from the floor, just long enough to accomplish knockdown. Enough fog has been used when the flame lessens and turns from bright orange to deep red. These indications come very quickly. It is through practice and experience that the nozzleman learns when to shut down from the overhead attack. The nozzleman changes to straight stream for a direct attack on the fire and subsequent overhaul. Extinguishment in remote areas by convection of steam is facilitated, and there is less danger of the firefighter being scalded by steam dropping from the overhead.
Hey, let's get some ventilation going in here.
Ventilation becomes much easier. The overhead attack allows us to manipulate thermal balance to our advantage. Rapid buildup of heat and combustible gases in fire buildings can present dangers to the firefighter. The nozzleman must constantly be aware of the fire progression in a building and his proximity to potentially hazardous areas. When in doubt, get out. In heavily involved, small to moderate-sized rooms, The fog attack with ventilation can be very effective. When the attack line is ready, the command to ventilate the room from the outside is given. The nozzleman literally pushes the fire from the room to the point of ventilation. In steady-state fires, many firefighters use the combination attack. This attack can be initiated from either the exterior or interior of the fire building. The combination attack is simply rotating the nozzle in a clockwise motion using fog. The fog strikes the ceiling, walls, and floors of the involved area. The clockwise rotation keeps the fire and smoke moving away from the nozzleman. A large free-burning fire can, of course, make any type of interior attack far too dangerous to be attempted. An exterior combination attack is one of the few options left to the firefighter at this stage of fire spread. The most effective attack will be achieved if fog is applied and then shut down before the gases are cooled too much. This way, the active convection currents carry steam to remote areas of involvement and help facilitate extinguishment. Some fires require tremendous rates of water flow for attack, backup, and exposure protection. In cases where hand lines are inadequate to flow these larger volumes of water or provide the reach necessary to penetrate the fire, master streams are frequently employed. Often, master streams are used to gain control of heavily involved buildings, and after a successful knockdown, interior attack and overhaul can be initiated.
Gentlemen, today we're going to squirt a little bit of water. We're going to practice our various fire attack techniques. The assistant chiefs and myself will be setting some fires in this house. Each of you will have a chance to work on an attack team. I'd like the nozzleman to take a look at and assess the fire as he finds it, decide upon the proper attack technique, and implement his decision. After you have extinguished the fire, we will have a short critique back out here.
To give firefighters the critical training and experience they'll need to make their own decisions behind the nozzle, practice drills such as these are absolutely vital. Weekend hours spent at training facilities or at expendable houses will result in efficient firefighting and lives saved.
The assistant chiefs and myself carefully inspect the building before we use it for this type of exercise. We make sure that it's structurally sound.
What is that, 1959?
59.
50 years born.
Is that right? Yeah. All of my men have had state-level training in fire suppression techniques. Generally speaking, we don't use this type of drill as a primary teaching tool. It does do a couple of things for us, however. On the fire ground, I don't get a chance to see what my nozzlemen are doing right up there at the nozzle. I'm generally outside the building conducting an operation. They're inside. Of course, in this kind of drill, I can follow the man into the building. I can watch and see exactly what kind of decisions he's making on the nozzle, and we can discuss that decision and subsequent action later on. Some of these guys are new. They haven't had much live fire experience. And when these men work together in a live fire situation like this, they get some confidence in each other's abilities. They're going to get a lot of confidence out of going into a structure that's on fire and extinguishing the fire under conditions that are very similar to what they'll meet at an actual structural fire.
Firefighters today are working under heavier demands than ever before. Equipment alone cannot begin to keep up with the many growing and changing fire protection problems. The nozzleman, most of all, must have a thorough knowledge of the latest fire attack techniques, plus the experience to know when these attacks can be used most efficiently. It is hoped the ideas illustrated in this film will inspire us all to do our job better.